Jordan Moore, Shaun, Cody, Max Browne, and Keely Eure joins us now for our weekly football roundtable. Plenty to talk about with this team. I had a blast on Saturday night. I'm sure it was too close for comfort for everyone involved, but it was a wild, fun game. What was your takeaway from it?
My first takeaway was that when it reached triple overtime, you turned to me and in your best broadcast voice, you were like, "It's time for PKs." And I was like, "Oh my God, this set the table." But it was wild. It was, my interns didn't know what was happening. It was wild. I didn't even know. I couldn't see what happened to Dennis Lynch at the end of the fourth. And I was like, why is everyone so upset? And then I was like, this is crazy. So a wild game for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure Arizona was 100% sure on the rules. I think they called a timeout because they didn't realize that the new overtime rules, and I think it was new for everybody. I think Jalen even alluded to it. He was just like, I wasn't entirely sure what was up, but it seemed like USC's coaches were ready and had a lot of two-point plays.
Yeah, Jed Fish he admitted it. He said, I didn't realize he had to go for two that early. My biggest takeaway, though, was I think you can have the frustrations a little bit with the defense, but also that's a game that USC loses under the last four head coaches and the last four cultures. And I don't think that's insignificant. I think that whole get down 17, get punched in the mouth again in the third quarter and whatnot, that's just a game USC loses in the past, and much rather win it and have things to correct rather than sitting here 5-1 and all pissed off.
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise to me was just they came out a little flat to me, and I thought after a Colorado game where they didn't play the Brandon ball all the way through the end of the game, they would have came out with some fire. Now, was that looking forward to Notre Dame? Was that late night start? I don't know. It just seemed a little flat. You watch the film and it's like obvious. It just jumps right out. Like Arizona was ready to go. They had a game plan. They had things in line. They knew exactly where they wanted to attack, and SC just kind of eased into it a little bit. And I didn't like to see that, but once it got going and you could see that they ratcheted up that energy, they started playing, they started firing on some cylinders. Offensively still kind of had some kinks all night, but defensively found a couple plays to make and get that one secured.
And that's why I'm excited about this week and then going forward, because now this team can maybe embrace a little. They're clearly being doubted. They drop in the rankings every week despite winning. Their fans are all over them on social media. I'm wondering now if they just sort of lean in a little bit to the underdog role. And you can't do that when you're favored by 21 every week, which they basically have been. They are the Vegas underdogs this week. They will be at different times in the second half of the season. People are sort of counting them out. I wonder if they can kind of lean into that and maybe take some of that pressure off of not just having to win, but having to win pretty, which they obviously have not been very good at the last couple
of weeks.
And
it seemed like that flip had kind of switched, at least in the post-game press conference, because you could see Caleb getting a little upset by the questions that were being asked, and he jumped in on a question that Riley was fielding about USC's defense, and I think he wanted to say more, but he was like, these guys are our brothers. This is why we were in this game. Like, this defense helped us out. And then Riley, the last thing he said when he got a question about the offense, he got a question about whether or not just yet. So count us out just yet. So I think they're starting to get a little frustrated, at least by the outside noise. And I know that's something that they say that they don't let it get inside internally, but it seems like, to your point,
but if
Jordan,
you can channel it, you want it sometimes
then
inside,
I
mean, that's what we've been seeing all over the country, right? I mean, Coach Prime's whole thing was taking the outside noise of everyone saying, "Oh, this is a joke. We're going to be a joke," and fueling them. Ohio State, when they went into Notre Dame, I don't even care what Lou Holtz has to say, but Ryan Day sure did, and he clearly used it to motivate his team. I mean, it's a fairly easy tactic to get guys going.
And it's interesting too, because you're going into a game where Notre Dame's coming off a loss, and if our defense is struggling from an outsider's perspective, Notre Dame's offense is struggling from an outsider's perspective, and they're getting heat there, and so. If they're still the favorite role and we're playing the underdog, that's great, even though they're having to figure out a bunch of their own offensive stuff. So that's a unique dynamic in this game where two storied programs, and when Notre Dame's offense rolls out there, both units are going to be doubted. And so if we can embrace that underdog mentality, maybe it allows that defense to play more free.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people have tried to divide this team, and when you look at a football team, you always think offense and defenses, but the good teams that I played on, it was just one team. It wasn't. We've always just looked at the offensive defense on this, but the main aspect, the main whole thing of this is to win this game, whether we do it offensively or defensively, find a way to win this game, and I think they've done a good job. And you see where I think Caleb got frustrated is they see it as a team. They see it as we're all in this thing together. We're fighting. We're not offense. We're not defense. We're USC, and we want to win these games. And however we win them, it's how we do it. And that's, I think, think Coach Riley can use that as his, kind of motivating factor. Is like, hey, they're trying to divide us. They're trying to, pull us apart. Let's stick together. Let's take this thing on the road and show them we can finish this thing out this year how we want to do it.
They were really asked that offensive identity question.
Last to end the presser.
It never stops with that. But let me ask it's kind of a similar type question, but it's a spin on, because it was one I was thinking of, which is not about the offensive identity, but the team as a whole. Typically sometimes in sports you sort of see these bellwether things, right? If basketball, if so-and-so scores 10 points, the team is 8-0 kind of thing. Is there anything you've seen from this team so far where you're like, okay, if they run for 150 yards, I feel great about them. If they run if Caleb throws for 300, I feel great about them. They have kind of won in different ways so far, defensively, offensively. They haven't relied on turnovers. It just doesn't feel like they've relied on anything yet. I'm curious if there's something that you guys have picked up where you go, hey, that to me is like when I know things are good if X is happening.
I always point to the defensive line because it's easy for me to look at games and follow like when I mentioned the energy of the team or the intensity. It was me for just looking at the front and seeing how they were attacking, how they were playing. Were they just catching guys, or they're just kind of laissez-faire attitude instead of coming off guys and trying to smack people and getting shed in blocks? And it changed in the game when I saw that. And that's always my kind of tell in offensive line, and how are they shooting out? How are they holding on to blocks? And that's always my bellwether, is just watching games, because I obviously Max is astute to watching the outside, and I kind of always break down games from the inside out. So I always watch that inside. If they're coming off and getting off blocks, I can usually tell the energy is right, and they're playing the brand of football I think that Lincoln Riley wants to play.
I'll double down on that. I feel like it's been a couple of weeks since we've talked about Bear Alexander, and those first few weeks when you felt Bear's presence, that's when you felt confident about the defense. And that's why we were sitting here saying, this is a defense that's taken strides. And we haven't necessarily said that the past few weeks because I feel like we haven't been saying Bear's name as much.
Yeah, I don't really have a bellwether yet. I really don't know. And it's funny because even in warm-ups, I try to get a sense of this team, and that hasn't even been a good indicator. So I thought that after ASU and Colorado, this team would be like, okay, we got close wins. Let's really, get this together.
Yeah.
Part of me feels like, okay, if it didn't happen against Arizona, it's going to need to happen against Notre Dame going into that environment, or else we might be talking about USC's first loss of the season.
And I kind of feel like they were searching for it. I think they're trying to find that. What are we on offense in that game? They were looking for it, and that's why I think Caleb was like, hey, wait a second. We don't know where it's going. The ball's in my hand. I'm going to start running it and figuring this thing out on the fly.
And it's what we talked about in the pregame show, right? We put up those stats of his first 5 games versus this year and last year, and we were noting that he was running a lot less. And one thing we talked about is when the chips were down, he would put his body on the line and just say, I got this. Because at the end of the day, again, to make the basketball comparison, you want the ball in your best players' hands at the end of the games, and that's how that game played out. I don't know that the ball ever came out of his hands. Austin Jones, I guess, ran in a touchdown late, but for the most part, the ball was in his hands late, and that's how it should be. This is his team to go down with or to go up.
And
with.
He wasn't having that Caleb Williams game, but the will to win I thought was impressive. Just, I'm gonna win this game. I'm having a bad night. I'm a little bit off all night. Can't find my guys, but I'm gonna win this game. How do I win this game? I'm gonna carry the ball into the end zone.
That second touchdown, oh my gosh. Yeah. He looked like he was down, and suddenly he's up and going, and it was insane. It's just, he started the game with a touchdown, ended the game too. He's going to do it.
Yeah, we talk about people's sort of will metaphorically, but his physical will he put on the game with several runs, including the one I just saw a screenshot too. Somebody screenshotted that play where literally he's facing the wrong way, guys on his back on the 3-yard line, and the caption's like, he scored on this play.
Yeah. Exactly.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, but he makes a lot of things work, even when they're not. And that was enough for the Trojans on Saturday night. All right, Trojans Live is sponsored by Pechanga Resort Casino, proud partner of USC football. Our over-under is next on Trojans Live. One final segment of Trojans Live on a Monday night. Jordan Moore, Shaun, Cody, Max Browne, and Keely Eure with you. We're fired up, guys. This is Notre Dame week. This is what we do this for. We'll all be not Max, but the rest of us will be headed.
I'll be watching though.
We'll be headed to
In our
South
hearts.
Bend for what is always a classic game just to be a part of, but a very winnable game for the Trojans this year, even though they are technically underdogs in it. And as we mentioned, they haven't won it in South Bend since 2011. It is still a game that's there for the taking for them, and I'm sure that they'll feel that going in. And that leads me to my over-under, presented by Pechanga Resort Casino, proud partner of USC Athletics. Okay, guys, the over-under is 30. That's the number.
Ooh.
The winning team will hold the losing team to over or under 30 points.
I'm going under 30 points. I think it's going to.
defense
Yeah,
guy.
I think defense is going to hold. I think it's going to be a slugfest a little bit. I think both teams. You're at the part of the season where both defensive coordinators have seen this offense a couple times, and they can last week they can get a little gauge on what they can do, maybe ways to kind of slow these offenses down. And I think it'll be a slugfest, lower scoring affair.
I got over. Sam Hartman's a different deal at quarterback for Notre Dame than Drew Pine a year ago, and Caleb Williams, like we just talked about, special. So I think this is a game in the 30s or 40s.
I haven't done my prep yet, but I'm going to say under. I think the weather's going to make this kind of what Shaun described, like a slugfest, lower scoring affair.
It's interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong. If Dennis Lynch, the field goal operation goes fine, they kick the short field goal. USC won 31-28, right?
Yes.
So it's, some of these things you go, oh, it's definitely over. And then you go, well, these things can happen in football a little bit. It's just because, USC average is 51.8. So if Notre Dame holds them to 28 points, that would be a heck of an accomplishment. But, the style of the game is going to feel different than this sort of classic Pac-12 shootout game that we've gotten used to the last couple of years.
It always does. And even my naive self when I was young and we were playing a brand of football and that was, trying to move the ball. And it just turns into like the rivalry for some reason just gets more gritty. It was like this in UCLA, the Notre Dame game. It didn't matter what both teams were, coming into the game. It was just like you knew it was just going to be harder and more physical for some reason. It just felt a little bit different. Everybody wanted a little more.
Yeah, I just don't see that sort of easy going up and down the field. We may get that later on in the season when USC plays Washington in particular. That feels like the game that may just end up being the classic 51-48, whoever gets the ball last. But in South Bend, I just don't know if those games happen. That game against Ohio State, there's some talented offensive players on both teams. Those teams couldn't find a touchdown over 60 minutes. I mean, that was a rock fight.
That's what's so interesting, too. You just have a Notre Dame offense that's struggling versus a USC defense that I know a lot of people are on. And I just think something's got to give in this game. And by all accounts, you got two NFL quarterbacks, which this could be it'll be fun no matter how it shakes out.
We'll be there to cover it for you. 4:30 p.m. Pacific time, kick 2:30. The Trojan Tailgate Show goes on. Trojans Live is a production of USC Sports Properties and Playfly Sports. Our executive producer is Drew DeHart. Producers Rick Cutler. Sweating it out for us today, Ben Conroy. Thanks for getting it done. And thanks to the crew. Thanks for everyone following us on YouTube. Big week ahead. Beat the Irish.